You're listening to the Topco Business Unusual podcast. Now, the Business Unusual podcast. Learn from the greatest minds in business today.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Topco Business Unusual podcast, where we are interviewing business leaders who are doing business slightly unusually. And today's podcast, it's going to be really exciting because if you've been living in the past 20 years, if you've been growing up with digital explosions and just the revolution of tech happening, I can almost guarantee that your life has been affected by the platform that we're going to be discussing today. We started out at Facebook, and then in 2021, we did a rebranding, and now we are in conversation with Duduetsang Makuse, Public Policy Manager, SADC from Meta. Welcome, Duduetsang.
Thank you for having me.
Duduetsang, what is the earliest piece of information or context that I need to understand about you to kind of understand who's sitting in front of me right now and everything that you've accomplished, where you are right now? What should I know?
Ooh. So that's a very big question. Where do you start? I suppose the most natural place to start would be to backtrack a little bit to maybe my younger self, and specifically my post-matric self, I think would be the first place to start, because that was a time when I was in the middle of a gap year program, a 2-year gap year program that I took, where what we were doing was basically community work. We were inside of schools, inside of communities, and really just trying to support, different organizations to do the work that they do, working in food gardens and all of that stuff. So very NGO-y stuff. But the main thing that I really want to drill into here is it's also the place where I concretized my mission. So I left that place feeling like, the vision of that institution, which was to create life-transforming experiences for other people, but specifically for young people, for that organization, was something that resonated with me. And so having left that place, I left with a sense of, this is a mission I can commit to for pretty much the long term. And I've been tweaking it and rejigging it along the way, but it came from the recognition that, as a young person, you want to change the world, you want to make it better, positive change, whether you do it through activism, you do it through school, you do it through entrepreneurship, so many avenues, right? But alongside that is the realization that you can't do it alone. And so if you can't do it alone, you start thinking about, well, where's my placement in this value chain, for a lack of a better analogy? And I was thinking about it, and I was like, I'm an ideator, I'm a thinker, I'm an analyst, So my place really is about how do I create opportunities for those that are maybe stronger at, implementing something or coming up with a different, somebody just needs a break. You just need one little thing to dislodge, and then boom, a beautiful idea is flourishing and having a ripple-on effect on other people's lives in a positive way, right? And so that's why this mission resonated with me so strongly, because I was like, I guess if I am in places and spaces where the work that I'm doing is creating opportunities for other people, then I'm at the right place. And so it's kind of like a little bit of a compass that I keep using and reflecting back on every time I decide what to do next. And it's also why, if you look at my CV, it looks like a fruit salad, honestly speaking, because it's like a little bit of apple, a little bit of banana, it's not a traditional trajectory.
Some strawberry.
No shape of it looks like we start here, we go here, which was, when I was coming out of school, was one of the main, pressure points for young people. It was get a plan, make it solid, go be an accountant, go be a lawyer. It's pretty straightforward. There's a blueprint for it, whereas mine was, let's wing it, let's just experiment and see. So yeah, that would be the moment.
So Meta's, of course, a global country that's affected so many people. Why you? like we're talking SADC as a region,
Yeah.
and you've kind of explained your backstory a little bit. What led up to you actually being employed at Meta, and what were they like? How did that conversation go? Where they were like, Duduetsang, we want you to be our public policy manager at SADC.
Wouldn't I wish that was the scenario? No, actually, it was not like that at all. I was not intending on being where I am. Like that wasn't part of the plan. I didn't like start off the bat and be like, oh, I want to go and work for global big tech, you know? That was never part of it. My plan was I basically want to be, as I said, in places where I'm going to be creating opportunities, but I was also deeply passionate about this continent and its people. And so I was selecting my opportunities on the basis of whether or not the work that I'd be doing would be driving us forward, would be showcasing the skills we have. And initially, I thought I'd do that through journalism. So I went and studied journalism. So I was like, oh yeah, we've got to tell the stories of the people that are doing amazing things here. We've got to really surface them and make sure that the opportunities available globally can be made available here. And so that was the driver. And it was the preoccupation. And after that, I think towards the end of my journalism studies, I went in also during that really awkward, like 2008 economic recession, which coincided quite heavily with a lot of what was at the time the digital disruption and convergence, you know. And so a lot of our professors were literally telling us, like, you guys are going to be media practitioners, but not in the traditional sense that you understand. So we're not even sure if we should call you journalists or filmmakers, whatever. It was an existential moment where everyone was like, are you even professionals or are you practitioners? What are you in a context where anyone can pick up a cell phone and make content? What do we call you then? Is it still a profession? So it was very much a time of a lot of ambiguity, you know, and as I was choosing my specialization, because I went into broadcasting, I remember thinking, you know, reflecting a lot on the media economy at the time. It was a time when we were seeing a lot of declines in terms of print sales, and the magazine world was just like on the rocky choppy, you know. So a lot of things were not looking great. And so having this focus of, well, if that's in decline, then I need to think of something else, which then pushed me into a space where I was like, okay, cool. I'm not going to do traditional media work in the sense that I had imagined. I'm not going to tell stories in that way, but I wanted to understand the disruption. And that's where I veered off, because that led me into what is media management? What does the media business space look like? What are the structures and levers that people are pulling to disrupt this media economy, but also to rebuild it into something else? Because I was like, if we're going to do this, we've got to be part of the generation that rebuilds it. If it's in decline, something else is going to emerge. So where do I want to be in all of that? And that led me into, you know, my media management year. After that, a little bit of interning at different places because I wanted to understand in practice what it was like. So I was on production sets. I was doing PR and comms. I was doing a little bit of social media management, really clarifying my skill set, you know, failing at some things, not really being great at others, but also discovering the things that I was good at. And then after that, it was business school. Business school then opens me up to this global arena. And I now can compare and contrast the impact of these digital disruptions back home versus with what they're seeing in the UK and the US. And business school for me was in the UK. So now I'm also meeting all these people from different countries who are opening my mind up to all the different opportunities. So when I leave business school, I'm thinking, okay, I need to go into management consulting or something related to strategy so that I can actually influence the directions of these organizations and where they're going. Then I come back home, 2016, and I'm living off my savings because there's no jobs, you know, and I've got like nowhere to start. I don't know which direction to go into, but I know I'm still passionate about the space. So I end up in the NGO world where it's basically passionate, committed individuals who are really, really bright. And these people actually, to be quite honest, also shaped a lot of my understanding of public policy because I cut my teeth there in public policy. And in that space, I was in a position where I could grapple with the different issues So what are the structural policy issues that impact how people use media or how they engage with the internet, what access they have, what are the limitations, what are the challenges, and start really tackling some of these bigger questions. And that then leads me to big tech. So it wasn't leave university, apply for the coveted internship, and then you got the job. No. And even that was a bit of a rigmarole, because I think the first time I tried, it was really like, no, come back next time. And then second time I got lucky, but in between I'd like tried to do a little bit of, hey, we're having a stakeholder engagement thing at Facebook. Do you want to come share your insights? So already I was building the body of knowledge externally that they found useful. And when the opportunity arose, I was there to basically take it.
So you were seeing they were having, for instance, that type of networking event that they were hosting, and you were like, I'm going to be there.
Exactly.
See what happens.
Exactly.
And then that's
Yeah.
To the final.
Yeah, look, your network is really is a powerful tool to have as a young person, particularly when you're coming up. And even I think as an older person and a seasoned person, I don't think a lot of professionals are anything without their network. So being at those places where, and also just like knocking on the doors, man, and being okay to like fail at things. I mean, I failed dramatically at sales at some point. I tried a sales job. Epic fail, did not last 2 weeks. It was very painful at the time, but it was also one of those clarifying moments. Like, this is not what I'm meant to do. I'm meant to do something else. So yeah, 100%, definitely those moments where you're not really sure, but you like, let me just try anyway. And then the other person is like, oh, actually, you've got something that we might wanna work with here. So yeah.
So then that final conversation, how did your final appointment at Meta happen?
Yo, that thing was tough, eh? Just drop your CV and walk in the door. That was tough. So basically, a really, really close friend of mine let me know that they were recruiting for a public policy role. Then I applied, and it was like this long process. I think it was a few weeks, if not 2 months or something, of like, and big tech interviews like that. So you just interviewing like 5, 6 people, because these are going to be your collaborators later. So they really need to make sure that you're going to be able to help all these different teams to drive the mission forward. And yeah, once I'd gone through that, I believe it was quite a competitive cycle, because, every time these opportunities come up in a context like ours, where so many young people are looking for a break, it can be a bit tight. But yeah, you just got to prepare, and then you get in there, you give it your best, and hopefully they want to take a chance on you, which they did with me. So yeah.
So your friends and family must have been there for the whole ride in terms of seeing you go into journalism and media and everything. What was that one day when you came back and you're like, by the way, guys, I now work for Meta?
It was, I'm not sure my family quite understood, because they like, my parents are like, oh, they're not online. Some friends and family were like, yeah, wow, finally, a big break for you. I think also because it coincided with that COVID time, right? When, things like so many orgs were negatively impacted. And the organization I was working for at the time was not excluded from that impact. So I'd already, like, people were like, oh, COVID was bad. But for us, it was already from 2019. It's a very tough environment, the civil society sector, because of the amount of dependence on like grant funding and stuff that you need, not only for your livelihoods, but to actually do the work. And so you suddenly make this pivot. I think there was a guy on LinkedIn that I actually contacted when I was thinking about moving on, because I'd been at the organization for about 5 years. I was like, it's a business cycle. I've done enough. It's time to hand over to somebody else. Sometimes you just gotta, step away, even if you don't know what's next. And so I found this, he's not really a recruiter, but he's like, I guess he's a recruiting consultant or something. And I just hit him up on LinkedIn. I was like, yo, I saw this stuff on your website. I really think it's, it's interesting. How do you help people pivot across sectors? Because one of the things that you can get stuck in really easily is be like, well, I'm trained in law, so I can't go into the creative arts, or I'm trained in the creative arts, so I can't go into business and strategy or business development or whatever, right? And he really, really was very, very helpful. What's his name? Chris Carruthers was very, very helpful in helping me to translate the skills that I had into the language of tech and into the language of the sector I was moving into. And that, I think, is one of the things that also made a difference between my first attempt versus my second one, right? It's like able to position yourself differently and to curate yourself and your narrative in a way that is coherent. Particularly if you had like a broad variety of experiences. It's one of those things that I found was very, very helpful for me.
It's actually so funny that you mentioned earlier that when you were studying in varsity, people were going on and the lectures are going on about how we were in the, like the digital boom and this digital explosion at that time. And it's like the language has not changed at all. I think that we're just recycling language, to be honest. It's like it's been going on for over 30 years now, and we're just still saying, oh my word, this new thing, it's changing, it's changing. And it's just
we like to have it's the end of the world as we know it moment.
We really love that.
We do that really well.
I know that you have quite an interest, according to your fruit salad biography, that you have quite an interest in sort of the intersection between media and media freedom, and specifically the African context. And I think in general, talking to you is really interesting because, again, I know Meta as this global company, this kind of monopoly over everything, and it was interesting for me to actually find out about you and to have engaged with you this past year and see that there's someone actually representing, you know, SADC within this whole conversation with Meta, and it's really encouraging as well. But you have this interest in this intersection between media and the African context. What do you think, you know, sort of Africa, what's the nuance between Africa and the way that Meta is doing things?
So I think for me, the interest is first of all, because I have a very clear recognition and acceptance of the fact that, you know, whether you call it the ICT space or the tech space or the media landscape or the digital media landscape, it is intertwined, and it is very much an intersectional space of sectors that, whether we like it or not, can codepend on each other, right? That's the first point. The second point is, we know from the previous iterations, Media 2.0, we know from, you know, broadcasting, for example, that the ways in which people consume media here can sometimes differ from how people consume media in the US, in the UK, or anywhere else. But we also know certain things to be globally true, like the fact that local content is a winner in most contexts, right? And this is why a lot of countries become so protective of those sectors. Then you have, you know, socioeconomic external factors that influence the ways in which people consume media and create media content and create technologies. So here you're thinking about, you know, connectivity infrastructure, you're thinking about levels of digital literacy, you're thinking about media literacy, you're thinking about the use of actual digital technologies and how people are using those tools. A simple example of this is in Europe and the US, because the internet is so ubiquitous, there isn't an over-reliance on things like WhatsApp, you know, because people don't have to pay exorbitant communication fees. But in the global South, because we're fighting data must fall, what becomes the leading product is WhatsApp and similar apps, right? Because people need to be communicating, and here they even conduct business on WhatsApp. You know, they want to use it to be productive. They want to not just build communities and have a, you know, a neighborhood chat group, but people are actually being like, here's my catalog of hairstyles, you know, book an appointment here. And so the ways in which people decide to use a technology, no matter where it's been created, can be very nuanced, which is why you can't just have this, you know, this perception of there's a technology that's created elsewhere and is imposed. I believe that our people are very resourceful and creative, and there are many examples of how a particular type of technology, whether it's a platform, whether it's a device, anything, comes designed for one purpose, lands on the African continent, and our people say, yeah, that use case is not really relevant to us. And then we repurpose it and we use it for something else. We're like, oh, this solar panel is for what? Do you want to make electric cars? Great. We don't need that. We're going to make an electric bike or an electric motorbike and slash on some solar panels on the side so that our people can get from A to B, or they can be productive. Mobile money is the classic example that everybody loves to use as a way of showing how creative our own people can be. And all they need is really just the bedrock infrastructure, right? To be able to sit there and come up with an application that is useful. So when it comes to Meta specifically, it's a global entity. There's no running away from that. And it's a big global entity.
Yeah.
It's got a big, big impact in terms of like the family of apps. So the reach is also huge. There's billions of users that are using Meta platforms every day at any given moment. Now, when you're in that place, your starting point is you want to start with universally accepted principles of business, but also universally accepted principles towards like human rights, digital rights, and all of that. And so the umbrella becomes everyone has a right to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We agree. Shut. And so that's the starting point. Then as you start moving into different regions of the world, you end up in, West Africa, where the country starts saying, well, actually, this Pride Month thing of yours, we don't like it. You're promoting immoral things.
Wow.
So now you sit there as a company and you're like, what do you do, right? And so you need teams of people whose work and expertise is focused on dealing with the nuances of those different countries, the cultural that might surface, and things like that. And where do you land on it? It can't then be the job of just one corporation to decide where to draw those lines.
Wow.
Misinformation is another one. You sit in one part of the world, something is unacceptable, it's misinformation. And then someone else is like, but it's my right to freedom of expression. So now what do you do as a big corporation? Do you take it down immediately? Or do you now have to deliberate about whether or not by taking it down, you're censoring that other person? Or in an instance where they don't have load shedding, power cuts, electricity infrastructure issues, or worse, governments that switch off the internet in some parts of the world. In parts of the world where governments are switching off the internet or trying to silence their critics, you become a lifeline. You're not trying to be one, but now you become one, because people are using the platforms to mobilize, to find help, to build consensus around an issue, to access resources, to ping someone, to reach out to someone and say, how do I get out of this country where I'm about to be killed for being a particular religious sect or whatever? So I think when I was coming in as well, I also had the same sentiment. I was like, this big entity, they don't care about people, and it's like this, and it's just blanket, whatever. Or the other extreme, which is, oh, you treat the US and the UK better than, the rest of the world, and South Africa and Brazil and everywhere else. But then when you start drilling down, all these countries have different jurisdictions, they have different laws, different regulatory and policy objectives and obligations that you must comply with. They have cultural nuances. The Nordics will say to you, we have nudist beaches. We want to walk around nude and post that we were at the beach. And we'll say, oh, hold up, we need to protect young people, and rightfully so, And then there's a reed dance in Swaziland. They post the pictures, we remove them. They say, Meta is censoring us. You know what I mean? So that's the world we live in. And these are the tensions that we have to grapple with and weigh up constantly in our day-to-day work. Is like, how do we make sure that ultimately the platforms are being used, 1, to build community, 2, for people to improve their lives, through the communities that they're building, and hopefully 3, to reach out beyond the confines that they're in, to find opportunities, to get access, to other resources and stuff.
Oh my word. I think you indirectly actually just described what a day of work is like.
I think I did. I think I did. Yeah, I think I did.
That is insane. So you're constantly dealing with basically having to learn about what all different places need and their different nuances and how and you basically have to come up with policies that support all of them. Would you say
Yeah,
something
so
like your role?
exactly, yeah. You have to be one aware of, what those different statuses are, but also the current affairs in each of those countries, because that can shift the needle in many ways. I mean, even this movement of anti LGBTQI bills, for example,
Yeah.
it's not, it's like it's been brewing, but it really blew up in the past like couple of years, right? So
Yeah.
there's that. Then this is why we work with so many other teams. And that's why when you interview, you have to talk to so many other people, because you have legal teams who have a specific expertise in understanding different types of laws, so that we make sure that we can comply, because there are laws that you'd inadvertently break if you didn't have legal experts. So we work very closely with them. Then we have, teams whose sole job is just to build our policies, whereas with our teams, there's also like the aspect of engaging stakeholders and helping them understand our policies and why we can't do certain things or why we will do certain things. And that's sometimes difficult for certain governments or business entities to understand why you're taking a particular position. So we plug into a lot of other brilliant people who help us to do this work, because there's no way that one little team can understand every type of policy that exists that might potentially impact the digital economy. It's just impossible. So you definitely rely on a lot of other people to plug into the work and to make it so that, you're able to at least create an environment where users can thrive, because ultimately that's also good for business, but it's good for communities as well.
I mean, that's amazing. And that's actually interesting. I can imagine, I guess this is slightly controversial, but I can imagine that, some maybe nationalists or, people who fall more to that side would say, Duduetsang, how could you sell out as a South African or as someone from Africa and like go work at Meta, the oppressors, the people who have, they're monopolizing everything. And just to hear how your work is actually like part of the solution in terms of you just basically have to be that middleman who's like helping the best.
That's one way of describing it.
Yeah. I don't know. It's so.
Look, I mean, you're touching on a very important thing, right? Like I said, it's a big entity. It's a global entity. The impact of the entity is huge. So you don't get to be this size and not have responsibilities, right? And I think there's a lot of pervasive thinking that, big tech shies away from its responsibilities or doesn't want to be held accountable, or, but if you listen to our global leaders, because everything that we work from comes from their steer, right? So if you listen to our global leaders, you actually see that for many years now, we've been saying, guys, the internet is more than 20 years old. Each country should make rules for what they need to see happening there. We're running away from regulation. Regulation is good for business. It provides policy certainty. It provides parameters and guardrails. We know where to color in and where not to, right? I think the other issue then also becomes, if you don't have people from different countries, how are you going to support users from different countries? I might be in Africa, but there's people in Indonesia, Singapore, Brazil, all corners of the world who are plugged into this organization to make sure that in those parts of the world, it is showing up as best as it can, right? And initially, like if you wanna draw a thick line, you might say, oh no, corporations are capitalist and leave them there, civil society, this but I think the two actually work together. You need civil society to raise the issues and raise the alarm when, powerful interests are out of line. And in turn, powerful interests also need CSOs to remind them and say, hey, we're giving you feedback that thing you tried is not great. The tensions come when the other is not complying with the other or vice versa. And then people are like, oh, yeah, we wanted them to do this. And now they're doing their own thing and, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But the bottom line is what are we all doing to minimize harm and to make sure people are having the best possible opportunities to capitalize on what the digital economy has to offer. Because we're all doing it from different corners. We might be in opposition to each other, but opposition is not a bad thing. If you're telling me that, otherwise we're going to be like the emperor that's not wearing clothes, thinking we're doing such a splendid job, only to turn around and discover that we've
But
made a
maybe.
mess. Yeah, and then we've made a mess of everything. So feedback is a gift. It's a feedback. It's one of our company values. It's one of the things that you can see even reflected in our work is there are teams whose sole job is to go and find feedback, to engage stakeholders and say, we made this new policy. We think it's going to work. And then they'll say, you started off right because maybe globally this is the principle, but in my country, it's not going to work for the following reasons, And they do this as their day job. They're reviewing, our community standards all the time. And I'm not even like plugging them. I'm just explaining how the organism works. So by the time you get to a point where something has gone wrong, then you can retrace and say, okay, where did we drop the ball? Who dropped the ball? And I think the last one on this is, for a long time, tech was the silver bullet. There was tech euphoria, tech optimism. Everyone was like, internet is democratizing information, communication. We loved it, right? We drank it up. Yes, let's do it. No more gatekeepers from traditional media, right? Then we had that moment of like, ooh, tech is not so great. 2016 happened. Cambridge Analytica happened. It was bad, right? It was bad. And we suddenly saw, oh, there's a lot of work that needs to be done to actually make tech the way that we think it should be, right? And tech companies responded. A lot of them started getting teams to deal with those specific issues, specialists in particular topics to address all those problem areas. But the thing I'm trying to underline is tech has never been about tech corporations. Tech is a whole of society thing. So when something is showing up on a tech platform, good or bad, it has started offline. You know what I mean? Like it's a lot of the time it's a mirroring of what we're already doing. If you're already running a business and you've got your inventory in your garage and you use Facebook to advertise your shop, and then you're shipping things from your garage, your business, even though your reach might be conducted and garnered up and you're drumming up your leads online, the physical product that you're selling is in your garage. So the things are intertwined. So when you try to draw these lines where you're like, oh, tech must do this, and this is the part that, same as online crimes, the crime happened somewhere. So we have to check that the rules, like the laws that we're using, are covering both. What's the recourse offline? What's the recourse online? Because ultimately, even tech's hands can be tied. There are limitations to what the tech can do at a technical level. So this means all the other guys, all the other entities also then have to participate in making sure that the whole economy is actually conducive and productive for all of us.
Yeah. I think I want to know one day or one situation where everything finally was worth it, what you're doing, because you're talking about this huge tension that you have to do between global corporates and regions and all the people who's going to get offended and not offending everyone, but at the same time making sure that, what is one day where you're like, okay, now I see why I do what I do, and this was worth it?
I think that day will come a couple of decades from now. I hope to God that when it does come,
you're still a struggle fighter.
Yeah, I hope to God that when that day comes, and my hair is gray and the kids are asking us what we were doing to shape the environment, that I can give them an answer that still holds water. Because I think I've had the fortune of working with people who really were instrumental in shaping the ICT ecosystem into what it is today. Drafters of the IBA, which then became ICASA. Like people who really played a huge role in setting up what we have now as South Africa, and really placed us in a position where we could be a front runner, right? So I'm hoping that because there's so much change and disruption happening right now, that when we look back as well, our generation will be able to say, you know what, we seized the moment and we did something with it, right? So in between, while I wait for that, it's the days when you discover that, you know, there's a developer who created a study aid on top of WhatsApp using Llama 3, which is our AI model, to literally teach kids, to walk them through matric study guides across sub-Saharan Africa in different languages. And he did it after his own experiences in Nelspruit taught him that having 3 textbooks shared by a group of however many students was insufficient, and that it would impact their education outcomes. So when you hear stories like that, you're like, okay, we're doing something good, because had that guy not had access to WhatsApp, had he not had access to Llama, who knows what he might have used? Would he have developed the solution? I'm not sure. So there's a lot of examples like that where, you know, you see someone who's saying, you know, and there's a lot of stories of folks who were negatively impacted by COVID, and they turned to like Instagram and stuff and started doing stuff online. And now they have flourishing businesses that they own. So contributions to like entrepreneurship are really important. And those stories are really encouraging, because it's like, it's okay. It's the nature of, you know, public policy anyway, to hold these tensions. What I'm describing is the same right now, probably in the health space, you know, with the NHI and the discovery and all these private medical care people saying this and that, and everyone's pulling in different directions. But ultimately, we're trying to work towards the same thing. So the tensions is it's not really the problem. It's more the outcome, as in when it's all said and done, are we going to be counting more positive stories, or are we going to be looking at a slew of like things that we did wrong? And right now, it's my belief that it's tilting towards all these shoots of opportunities that people are creating, which are in turn creating positive impacts for other people. You know, all these learners that are using these technologies because a teacher is sitting on WhatsApp sending study guides and talking them through a problem. Who knows what they're going to do tomorrow? You know, one of them might be somebody that creates something really amazing and that changes other people's lives. And it's that cycle of creating those opportunities to positively impact people's lives that keep me going personally. So yeah, I don't know, we'll see.
You mentioned that case study about this learner using Llama and AI. It's the buzzword of 2024. It's the buzzword of 2024.
Yeah, it is.
How's it impacting the space from your perspective in your role?
So I think the thing that we're not factoring in a lot of the conversations, a lot of conversations are, you know, some are very doom and gloom, like, okay, doom and gloom, no problem. Then there are a lot of spaces where people are raising very real concerns, right? Very real ethical concerns, very real concerns around access, concerns around the use of, you know, people's data, privacy concerns. These are real considerations because they influence how we're going to set up what might become an AI, you know, sub-sector. But I think we also need to backtrack a little bit, because the moment we're in is not really the inception of AI. It's just the moment at which AI burst into the public domain. You know, AI has been around for decades. You know, if you talk to the nerds, they'll tell you that this is like something from the 40s and they can trace it back there. You know, the 50s, the 60s, they'll tell you this person had this concept and then it led to machine learning. And then all of this is the, you know, bedrock infrastructure of what we now understand as AI, because we're using it at the last end, at the content level. But the architecture of it has been around for a long time. And specifically for Meta, we're talking about a 10-year trajectory. So this was like, what is it now, 2024? So from 2014, 2013, you know, Facebook at the time then sets up its AI research unit. And these are like PhD students and, you know, wonks and engineers who get to research and try different applications of the technology to what we have now. Before the, you know, big, you know, language models and chat tools and all of that, we were sitting with a situation where it was AI powering some of the background tech that gives you the experiences that you have on Facebook and Instagram. It was helping with the algorithmic feeds, the ranking, the filters, all of that. These are all snippets and components of one bigger thing. So we need to think of it very, very holistically. The second thing, well, the third point really around that is once we've, as we try to figure out what the guardrails are, how we define what ethical AI is and how it's supposed to work, what it's supposed to do, what it's not supposed to do, how to minimize the risks, the harm, the bias, because that's also like real concerns, but also how to create opportunities for applications. I earlier mentioned that for one entity to sit with the kind of power that I think a lot of people right now think Meta sits with, it's unfathomable. It would be irresponsible, actually, right? Because you can't rely on one organization to decide all the rules, to shape this whole new tech. It's like basically allowing one entity to formulate what the internet as we know it now is going to look like, and thank God it was, Professor Tim there who decided let's have an open internet. Otherwise, who knows what it would have looked like, right? So that whole thing then means that you need organizations to pivot in a way that maybe they're not naturally inclined to do, right? So you need to be open in a way that some might be like, that's not good for business. So for us, that looks like democratizing our AI tools, all our Llama models, all of them. The threshold for you to pay to use them to start developing your own thing is quite high. So that means anyone who has the know-how and wants to tinker around can pretty much access our tools and start figuring out whether they are going to make another Fundamate or something else entirely. And I think that's a really powerful thing. And I think the other thing is, and this is really my last point, which I've already touched on, but it is important for, policymakers, because there's this running joke in policy circles that policy is always playing catch up to reality. It's always been that way. Even in traditional media space, it's always been that way, right? And I think there's a moment now for policymakers to really get into the weeds of what they envision for the countries that they're in. How do you want the people in the country that you're in to use this technology? Where are the opportunities? There's so many researchers who've been doing work around AI, around technology, and they're not, they're not technophobes, but they're also not on the extreme end of being like techno euphoria everywhere. They're techno realists. They're very clear about the pros and the cons of these tools. And these are the minds that we need to be bringing into the conversation to help us figure out what's the best way forward, because the tools are here and the kids are using them, people are using them everywhere, and they're upending different sectors in different ways. So there's a lot of think work that is required for us to figure out how are we going to govern this space, and how are we going to govern it differently in different sectors, because the applications are not just for filters and ChatGPT to do your homework. There are legal implications. The health sector might be using it for diagnostic tools. Should we be drawing a line somewhere? Education sector is another place where AI is really got potential to revolutionize the space. What does that mean for teachers? But also, what does that mean for learners, right? In some instances, it means less harm. It means you don't have to send mining students into the actual mine shaft. You can give them a VR headset and give them a learning experience without putting their lives at risk. That's a game changer. So all of these things have to be measured up with a very level-headed approach that seeks to be open, seeks to be collaborative, and deepens the specific sub-knowledge that is required to formulate something comprehensive. So I think for that, I don't know, I'm particularly proud of the fact that, unlike, other spaces, the company that I'm in we've taken this posture where we're saying, right now, we're in an opportunity to open this space up. So let's do so. Let's invest in opening it up. Let's do so. We might not get a lot of things right, but we get some things right. And I think this is one of those things.
I'm struggling to decide which question to ask you last, because I have so many things just on the tip of my brain. But I think this one is just too relevant to right now, and also to the younger generation to everything happening right now. And I think I'm quite on board with you in the sense that I agree with you that the blame can't just be on, you know, these global organizations and everything, as everything is the burden is on them 100% to change everything and to make everything. But the current situation, of course, that we are in is a world where technically our cell phone is our extension of our body, you know. And so, you know, we're walking around, we're hearing of these stats of people and their mental health decreasing. A lot of people attribute that to social media addiction, etc. I think it's quite relevant to ask you, as involved in public policy at Meta. Firstly, this might be quite personal, but do you find that yourself, like how do you find that you manage this hyper-connected space that we're in currently? And what advice would you say that you have for people who literally have been brought up in this world where they have from bottle to iPad, you know?
Yeah.
Like what advice do you have?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big one. And look, the mental health issues are, they're not one of those things that we can, you know, sort of throw the ball in other people's courts. I think here there is like a big sense of responsibility in terms of understanding that, like any, you know, whether it's a product, whether it's a, you know, like anything else that we do in the world, anything else that we consume, you know, whether it's the beverage companies and their alcohol or whatever, right? There is a responsibility that is carried by different companies. And in addition to that, if you have young people in your home, then you also carry a responsibility towards their mental health. And so does their school, and so does the community, and all of that. So from our side, from a purely technical perspective, from our side, when we've noticed that there were problems around young people either spending too much time online or being harmed online or being exposed to potential harm online, we started making a lot of product interventions. And I think we don't do a really good job of talking about what we technically have available to minimize these kind of problems, to help, you know, in situations where people are having a bit of a tough time and some of it is attributed to their online activities. So we call them tools and services, but it's literally, you know, you're inside of your Instagram, your parent has signed you up for an under 18 account. We've designed the platform so that it will remind you that you've been online for a little too long, you know. And I think all tech companies have started doing this. Apple sends you your screen time metrics every other day to show you how much time you're spending online, right? There's also the, you know, different features that might say you're looking at this kind of content for a little too long. Maybe, you know, that's enough with the soccer balls. Maybe you want to look at some swimming gear. Clearly you're interested in sport, but let's diversify. And, you know, people were not very happy with when we changed our discovery engine ranking. They were like, oh, I don't see the people that I follow anymore. And these were some of the efforts to make sure that you're diversifying what people are consuming online. So that you don't have that extreme polarization. Now you're in an echo chamber, because there are a lot of accusations around, you know, tech is creating echo chambers where, you know, people who have particular views have those views reinforced by other people who hold them. And so it doesn't really help in terms of democratizing the space, right? So there's a lot of little mini features that sometimes I think users get quite annoyed with us when they see us doing another, what's this now? What's this button for? But it's in response to addressing some of, you know what I talk about, right?
It's AI.
You know what I mean? What's this, man? I don't need this, you know, but it really is about how do we build in the safety by design? How do we build in privacy by design? How do we build in consent by design? But we also need help, right? Like I said, if you have an under 18 person in your house, it's a child, according to South African law. So if we know that this child is, you know, linked to this particular individual, it's your kid, and you've set up this under 18 account, immediately our teams and our tools can start blocking access from adults that are not connected to you. But if you're a parent and you're not lock and step keeping up with, you're not poking around the way that you used to as a young person to figure out different features, you won't know this. And, I think you might have also noticed that the Facebook Help Center, if you go in there, a few years ago, it was like a couple of paragraphs. Now it's reams and it's a mini website, that thing, You go into the Help Center, there's so many different resources for young people, for women, for public figures, for businesses, because we recognize that different users have different needs and they face different risks. So preventing all those risks means these folks need to understand what we have in place so that they also know what we don't have in place. If there's something really dangerous, God forbid, that is life-threatening happening online, we won't be able to help you because we're not law enforcement, but you can get help through the platform. So you might be able to, like if you're searching for things that you shouldn't be searching for, we might say, this is a little concerning. Do you need help? The local entity that can help you here, whether it's SAPS, whether it's SADC, the mental health folks, this is their number. So before we show you that content, you're still a user who is an adult and you're allowed to choose what you consume. But we will interrupt it and say, maybe talk to SADC before you look at this, or maybe call the police instead if you are reporting something of this level, because this level of harm, even if we remove the content, something else is happening offline, right? And it brings me back to that whole of society approach. So it's about recognizing the responsibilities that we all have as different stakeholders in this ecosystem, and then also the amount of work that we all have to do to make sure that users know where to find help. Part of the reason why people know to go to the police is because they taught, when you're in grade 1, 10, what is it? 10 111? Exactly. You remember it, and 0805555 child line, same thing. So from our side, there's definitely a gap in terms of like making sure that people know what this is and where they can find help, where they can find the services, where they can find the tools. And the last piece is, for me personally, like I'm also like one of those, introverted people where once the day is over, I need my downtime. Cheers, bye. I'm not going to answer your call. Sorry. Send me a message, because I need to recalibrate. I'm in we're all in a very busy, fast moving, information overloaded environment. And so for young people, you basically also need to start teaching children early on that, when you're limiting screen time, for example, it's not a punitive thing, right? You're not trying to punish them. It's just about teaching a way of being, a way of being a digital member of society, a way of being a digital citizen, in the same way that you would go for a walk or eat. This is part of a basic practice. We switch on at certain times, we switch off at certain times, and it's okay, similarly to when you're trying to get teenagers to, buy into working with you to keep themselves safe online. It's not a punitive thing where the parent is supposed to be the police dog and like watching you, who are you talking to? No, you got to get into the practice of like, how do we have these conversations with young people so that they understand that, no, I'm not trying to snoop into your DMs. That's not what the tools do. They don't allow you that. They just allow a parent to be proactive and do their parental duties easier. And that would be helpful also to the teenager, because once you're in that power dynamic of a dangerous person trying to hound a child, I mean, it's horrific what will happen from there. So these are all different steps that I think we all need to start shifting our mindset around, because we have offline lives, but we have online lives. And we don't like to think about the morbid aspects of our online lives, who's going to close your emails when you're gone, all of that stuff. But these are real things. Nobody thinks about that. And we should, exactly, new fear activated. So we need to think about that, and we need to really build it into our practice, as I said, into your daily life. Like, how do you manage hyperconnectedness in a way that, these expectations of, if I send someone a WhatsApp, they must reply now. No, they shouldn't. You don't know what they're dealing with. They're cooking their children dinner, or something completely different is happening. So now you're getting upset. Now there's social tensions. I mean, no. So we really need to shift our mindsets around that. And I think the more people start doing that, the more we'll also see less of these instances where, you know, the tech becomes a driver for negative things and for really affecting people's health in a negative way. There are many interventions that, you know, a lot of researchers are really looking at around how people can manage their digital lives differently. And I think we all need to really just look at the ways in which, you know, when the device people have created this button that tells me my screen time is overboard, you know, what's my plan to mitigate that? When the app tells me that I'm looking at something for a little too long, you know, am I also going to allow myself to say, oh, let me put down my phone and have dinner with my family instead? You know, but yeah, from our side, we've always been an iterative company. We're always trying to improve what we have. And I don't foresee that, you know, Meta is going to be stopping anytime soon in terms of improving the platforms right now and how they currently are. Because ultimately, you know, if they're not great for people to be on, then people are not going to use them. And that defeats the purpose of our existence. And how are you going to build communities then when individuals are not feeling safe and showing up online?
You have 1 minute to, I saw this question on Diary of a CEO and I was obsessed.
Wow.
You have 1 minute to pick up the phone and magically your 12-year-old self also has a line to you. What are you going to tell your 12-year-old self?
Don't give them no mind, kiddo. Keep at it. That's it. That's what I tell my 12-year-old self. Keep at it, you know? Yeah.
Duduetsang, thank you so much for this podcast today. It's been a long-awaited one, and one I think that a lot of people are going to resonate to and find extremely relevant as well. So to our audience watching, thank you so much for tuning in, and remember, continue doing business slightly unusual.